There's a very specific kind of expectation when it comes to memoirs like this. You see the premise, someone leaving the ultra-Orthodox Jewish world, and your brain kind of fills in the gaps before you even open the book. You expect tension, you expect conflict, you expect a very clear narrative of before and after. And if we're being honest, we kind of expect a bit of misery. Not necessarily in a bad way, just because that's the pattern we've been trying to recognise. So when I went into Brooklyn Odyssey by Zalman Newfield, I thought I knew exactly what I was getting, and I was wrong. I'm just going to say I was wrong. And I didn't clock it immediately, by the way. It wasn't like there was some big moment where the book announced itself as, like, different. It just kind of showed up. Because the opening feels very familiar. You get an introduction to the world, to the family, to a structure that if you've read anything in this space before, you recognise the rhythms of it. There's a cadence to these stories, but then there's a change, and it's subtle. Instead of feeling like you're being guided for a study case, you start to feel like you're there, like you're sitting in the room while these things are happening, and that's a very different experience. I think one of those big misconceptions people have, especially if you've never really engaged with the Hasidic community, and I'm one foot in, one foot out, long story, is that this misconception is it's very closed off, very self-contained, and yes, there are elements of that. But what this book does really well is it shows you a version of life that isn't just sealed off from everything else. Because of his growing up and involvement with Chabad Lubavitch outreach, there's movement, there's travel, there's interaction, there's this constant brushing up against the wider world. So instead of this narrative being about someone trapped in a box trying to claw their way out, it's more like watching someone looking out a window. Curious, but not quite opening the window yet, if that makes sense. But there's also this very strong awareness there's something beyond the window. That is a terrible metaphor, and I do apologise. And that curiosity becomes the driving force of the book, of this memoir. There's no anger, no rebellion, not even dissatisfaction in the way you might expect, just it's questions, it's observations. It's that slightly restless feeling of wanting to understand more than you've been given. And I think this is why it feels different from a lot of memoirs in this space. Because it's not built around breaking away, it's built around leaning in. I think this is the part that's either going to click with people or completely throw them. Because if you go in expecting something like Angela's Ashes, where hardship is front and centre, you're not going to get that here. There are difficult moments, but it's not a misery memoir. There are things that are uncomfortable. There is tension that exists, but they're not presented as the defining feature of his life. There's happiness here, there's humour, there's a genuine sense of affection for parts of that life, and that's important because it makes everything feel a little more real. People don't experience their lives in neat little categories, and this is a quote from someone I know. People tend to think that memoirs, and people tend to write them, they fall into, this was bad or this was good. Life and reality isn't that. It's all mixed together. And this book leans into that. I think this is why the book the books like this tend to win over people. Because structurally, they're not doing anything experimental, but the voice. And if the voice in a memoir is good, the voice will carry everything. There's this weird, brilliant, if you've ever watched interviews with Zalman, dry, almost understated sarcasm running through it. And he's not trying to make you laugh, it just feels natural. Like someone remembering things and occasionally stepping into the side of that memory and go, yeah, this was a bit odd, wasn't it? I love that. Because it stops the book from ever becoming too heavy for too long. It gives you space to breathe. This is something I think that people end up thinking about these books. As you can tell, I'm not scripted. I apologise. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I've seen some discussions around this book. I've seen some videos. I've seen reviews. I've read a few things, and a lot of them are very academic. They talk about identity formation, cultural framework, psychological transition, and all of that is brilliantly valid, especially if you've read his earlier book, Degrees of Separation, which leans into that much more, in much bigger ways. But with Brooklyn Odyssey, that approach feels incomplete, because that's not how the book feels. And I know this sounds a bit vague, but stay with me. When you're reading this, you're not sitting there thinking about the theory of the book. You're thinking about moments, little snapshots of life, conversations, observations. The way certain things are described, just feeling slightly off-center, is what makes them stick. It's immersive, but in that nice quiet way. It doesn't demand your attention, it just keeps it. I think the best way I can describe this is that it feels like a human story first and a leaving a community story second. And I think that order matters. Because it means this book isn't trying to prove anything, it's not trying to justify itself, it's not trying to present a perfectly structured narrative where everything leads neatly to a conclusion. It's just showing you a life as it unfolds, messy in parts, clean in others, but it's always very honest. And I'll be honest, this isn't going to work for everyone. And I mean that. If you want a very clean, linear, emotionally intense narrative, this might feel a bit too understated. If you're looking for like big dramatic turning points and tell-alls, and you're not going to find them in the way you expect. This is a quieter book. It asks for a little bit of patience. And if you settle into it, you let it be what it's meant to be, and not what you expect it to be. It really does stay with you. And in that slightly strange way where you're not thinking about specific events, you're just thinking about the feeling of having those events. It's a really interesting descriptive poise and prose within this. And just an aside, I need to mention this because it's genuinely annoying me. For whatever reason, getting a physical copy of this in the UK is a nightmare. I don't know if it's distribution, I don't know if it's publishing rights, but it's weirdly difficult. You can get it digitally or an import, which again is frustrating. Why is this not available anywhere? Or it's like 6 months delivery. But anyway, I went into this expecting something quite specific, and what I got was something a lot quieter, a lot more reflective, a lot more honest, a lot more interesting, because it's not, like I said, it's not trying to shock you, it's not trying to break your heart, it's not trying to convince you of anything, it's just sharing a perspective and an experience, and sometimes that's more than enough. Like I said, check this book out. It's hard to get in the UK, but most of my audience are like 97% Americans, so I don't even know why I mentioned that. I'm working from notes at 2 o'clock in the morning because I can't sleep, and I've just finished this. But this book really paints an interesting picture, especially with my own experience in my life right now, kind of tentatively finding my way back. It's an interesting way of looking at it, and I think, like, I will say this, just check out Zalman's interviews, check out the stuff he did with Frida Weissel, just really fascinating. And that was the episode, so I'm Darv James. If you enjoyed this, remember to like and subscribe, because I want to know what you think in the comments. I guess you could call this part of the exploring series, maybe a public episode, but it's an interesting look at life and through a different lens. If you want early access in the podcast and all of that fun stuff, do check out my Substack, do check out Patreon or channel memberships here. They are worth it. This is a brilliant book, and I'm so glad I got to read it, despite the frustration of having to get a copy mailed to my friend in Texas to mail to me in England, because it was quicker than ordering it on import, which is ridiculous. Anyway, I will leave it here, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.